Have we heard from Josh? I don't see him.
Yesterday, I think he joined via the participant link or the attendee link. So
Okay.
It's still populating the attendees, so I'll keep an eye out.
Thank you.
Okay, so for commissioners, I need to bring Dana, Eric, and Rebecca over.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Amber, did your team have any preliminary comments before we got started?
I do not, Chris.
If you can see my screen, just as a call out for anyone listening, this is how you can grab the supporting documents. I'm on the main county website, How Do I, and county budget. And then all the supporting documents are here that we'll be going over.
Thank you. Okay.
I don't see Josh yet, but I'll keep an eye out and bring him over if he comes in as an attendee.
Appreciated. Karen, the floor is yours.
We're good to go.
Great. Okay, joining me this morning is Dana Daniels, the clerk of the board, Eric Baker, our senior policy manager, and Rebecca Prudel, our volunteer coordinator. This is the Board of County Commissioners budget, which is relatively small, about 1% of the general fund. And for a budget our size, significant cuts typically means people. So working with the Board of County Commissioners, we were tasked with finding the necessary reduction without impacting the normal step increases and longevity increases that our staff would be experiencing, and without cutting positions. So that was our challenge that we started mid-year in this year with looking for those reductions that could carry over into 2021. And I think with the creativity of the DAS staff and some generosity and creativity on the commissioner's side, we were able to make 8%. We didn't quite make our 10 because of the requirement for some of the status quo salary changes that are highlighted in that request cell on the middle of the page. Commissioner Garrido was gracious to allow us to not fund her vacant planner position, which would be working directly with her. So we were able to take that salary savings. We also reallocated staff to what's known as general administration and operations. Those positions do provide a great deal of other support to the other departments and not just to the Board of County Commissioners. That increase to GANO was offset by the commissioners agreeing not to reduce spending and discretionary line items that they have responsibility over in GANO. So we were trying to mitigate the reallocation of staff costs by offsetting it with reductions in discretionary spending. Two policy staff positions mid-year to assist with backfilling the responsibility of that vacant planner position, and also to help with our administrative support. I'm getting a message that says my internet connection is unstable, which is interesting. So all in all, we were able to make a significant reduction in our personnel cost and offset that accordingly. Supplies, we made a reduction in supplies. We also made commissioners also agreed to reduce their mileage reimbursement. We also reduced travel, per diem, registration, and other categories to eke out as much savings as we could. Very appreciative of the rate reduction from information services and from risk management. Those helped tremendously in our being able to meet our reduction request. I wanted to say that our staff is 70% of our staff is telecommuting right now. we are among the upwards at its peak of 350 employees that were VPNing and utilizing the technology that Information Services was able to put in place. In some instances, not in our department, but in other departments, I know whole setups, towers, and screens went home with people to be able to facilitate people teleworking and reducing their presence in the office. We have been working largely on making sure that the continuity of operations continue, making sure that the board continues to be able to hold their public meetings virtually. Alex in our office became the Zoom guru and has helped us set up our not only our board briefings, but our regular board meetings on Monday nights. We've seen a little bit of an uptick in attendance from people who have found us on Zoom, as well as continue to watch us on YouTube. So some of our other senior staff has been pivoting also to help with COVID relief. Eric has been working closely with the board and other departments to make sure that we are responsibly spending our CARES funding that the board has given us directions on. Rebecca has been plugged in with the health department and the health and has been helping with their outreach, plus working with DEM emergency management to help with the COVID response as well. So you see her hand in a lot of the daily and weekly reports coming out of emergency management. Dana has been interestingly having to respond a lot more to public disclosure requests. I think with the auditor's closure, people have been finding workarounds to try to get access to documents that they ordinarily might have gotten from the auditor. So she's seeing an uptick in public disclosure requests. Very appreciative of the departments that heeded our call very early on to make targeted reductions and to carry those reductions on into 2021. I know that it was painful for some departments, but I think a lot of people were here during the prior recession and understood that we needed to act quickly and take those targeted reductions, which put us in better stead for weathering the downturn in our revenue. So with that, unless anyone has any questions.
I have a statement and a question, if you can hear me.
Yes.
Thank you for that comment that DAS and Board of County Commissioners have been, the generosity. I don't think I've ever heard us described as being generous, but thank you for that. On a serious note, you said 70% of our staff is telecommuting, our staff.
Commissioner staff, right?
Fourth floor, yeah.
Yes.
And this may be a Nancy question, HR question. As we go through this process this week, and then we start deliberating, I think next week, to get to the budget numbers for 2021, can you give us some guidance, or Nancy perhaps later, in terms of how you see this 70% playing out in 2021? I know it's a crystal ball question, but we are planning and making decisions for 2021. I'm just curious about your thoughts.
Well, among other things, this virus has been disruptive to how the workplace is organized. I think a lot of us assume that telecommuting will continue as long as we can support it through the end of the year and perhaps into 21. I think a lot of our employees are finding efficiencies in telecommuting, and many of them may not feel comfortable coming back into the workplace until there is a vaccine that's in place and being distributed. So I think the supervisors are having to be creative, not only with in their own lives, managing their own children, but also knowing that employees who are telecommuting have to juggle their own school needs with their school-age children. So I imagine we're getting more comfortable with telecommuting and finding that we can keep up on the productivity. I think there are departments that are now staggering their schedules, so they have some people in the office one week and then telecommuting the next. I know the clerk's office is doing that in particular. So there's a lot of creativity that's going on. That being said, as it relates to one of your favorite projects, Commissioner Wolf, for the courthouse, I think we need to take a step back and look at our how disruptive to our growth projections the virus might be. Do we need a new addition that's sized the way it is? Do we go back? We need to go back and look at our technology assumptions to make sure that we can accommodate the virtual hearings that most of the courts have moved to. So the virus is disruptive in a lot of different ways, but I think it'll be beneficial for us to take a pause and kind of look at what the workforce and the workplace is going to look like in 21 and beyond.
Thank you. And just finally, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, Karen, but you talked about the board, county commissioners. I thought I heard you say reducing our mileage. I think we ceased our mileage. I heard you.
There was a line item that we had for mileage reimbursement since staff's not going to meetings as much, or they're going to meetings virtually. We eliminated that line item. The commissioners also had an automobile reimbursement that they agreed to release because of the virtual meetings that they're going to now.
Okay. Thank you.
So I want to go back to your vocabulary of generous and gracious to the board. And you said that I was gracious about releasing my vacant planner position, but I'm really struggling. So I need for the board to be able to have a discussion about making do with the staff that we currently have. And because staff has planner positions have been allocated to each of the other two commissioners, it's very difficult for me to find my place in getting assistance. So the Board of County Commissioners at one time did have a shared staff, and I think we have to have some kind of a discussion about what that looks like as we reframe, so that I can have at least an equal amount of staffing support to the other two commissioners.
And I think that was part of our conversation when we went into this budget development and realized that with the vacancy, we had to capitalize on that vacancy, that we would really, for all intents and purposes, resume sort of that pooled resource. And so both Catherine and Jennifer are available for support.
But I think the three of us have to talk about, how we respect the staff and also our own need for equal amounts of attention.
I would agree with, well, not agree. Hate to hear you say you're struggling, but we talked about pre-COVID, before we hired policy analysts or interviewed. In fact, I've never had a meeting with Catherine Schaefer except when I interviewed her, and that was whenever that was, in February or March. I should say a live meeting. We meet every day. I'm certainly open, as we talked about in the beginning, to share at least all our resources in terms of policy analysts, and that was what we discussed before. And there have been changes since then, of course, and I continue to think that we can sit down and talk about it and make it equitable for all of us.
I do too, but I think we need to. Because I think the staff needs to hear sort of what the expectations of them are as well.
And I think Eric is still, really playing that role of being able to assist all of us with making sure that the various support needs are resourced and equitable. So I think that's our MO and moving forward to make sure,
I just feel like we need an overt discussion about it.
I agree.
Or it does.
I support.
Thank you. Anything else for Karen?
Not for me.
We're a few minutes ahead of time.
Can I give an opportunity for Eric or Dana or Rebecca to pitch in?
Sure.
Since we have time.
Sure.
I didn't prepare them for the opportunity to speak, but I don't want to let it go past if they wanted to.
And who's first?
Dana, do you want to go first?
Hi. I guess all I really want to say is I really appreciate administrative services working with us and trying to figure out what the best options were so we can get our budget down to where we are and not having to cut any positions. So I just wanted to say thank you to them.
Nice.
From policy staff, yeah, we definitely want to make sure that all the board members are being adequately served. There will be one staffer down, and with CARES being such a big chunk of policy staff's work right now, not just myself, but some of the others, there may be some limitations going into 2021 to take on larger size projects. Policy staff, again, we were oftentimes a recipient of projects that had couple-year durations. Because a lot of those are still in existence with a smaller staff, I think we definitely can provide assistance to all the board members just as we're going through and talking about larger long-term projects that will take up staff time. Those may be things that we might want to discuss with the full board before having a policy analyst start down those, as it will have staffing, or not staffing, but workload reverberations, not just over a couple weeks or a month, but potentially significantly into 2021. So that may be something that I may be coming to you in policy briefings as we start moving into 2021, if that is acceptable to the board.
Well, I think a big discussion is necessary. So look forward to talking with you about it.
Rebecca?
Yeah, hi, commissioners. I think, just the big impact that I've seen, of course, is on our volunteers with the COVID, and we'll see how we bounce back, in the year ahead. But I do want to, mention that we do have hundreds of volunteers still very active in the county, those serving on our advisory groups. And of course, the volunteers that are supporting emergency management and the county's response to the COVID pandemic. So, we're really just going to be looking at into the new year different ways of managing some of our volunteer programs that haven't bounced back yet. And it's been really interesting and enlightening to work with the different volunteers and come up with different creative ways of still supporting county services, but in ways that people can do that remotely or in other ways in their communities that they can be supporting us. So a lot of our focus will be on that in the year ahead.
So Rebecca, as our advisory boards and councils come online, we're supporting them relative to that virtual platform of Zoom, et cetera, to be able to resume their meeting?
Yes, for sure. Most of the groups took a couple months off when all this just got underway and we weren't sure what was, happening or, how long this was gonna stretch out. But it became apparent after a couple months that the groups had work to do and they wanted to get back to work. So yeah, commissioner staff has definitely been helping to support. We have 30 something advisory groups, and they are now all meeting remotely via Zoom and looking at still getting the work done, just in again, a more creative way, and but just I think as effective, and in some ways, again, there's more accessibility for people doing some of these meetings remotely. So yeah, our advisory groups are definitely all up and running and very engaged right now.
Great.
Cool.
A question for Dana. You had been working on a project or looking at sort of the platform that not only the Board of County Commissioners, but potentially within DCD and supporting the Hearing Examiner Planning Commission, looking at sort of the platform that we have for that interface online documents, sharing, meetings, so on and so forth. Is that still going forward, or is there a status update on that?
We had actually looked at that as a potential budget reduction for 21. And so we're going to see how revenues come in and maybe revisit that in 21.
Okay. So I think it's just a good point, though, that we're always looking to try to make that interface more user-friendly for folks, especially in this platform, and when folks go to the county website to find our agendas, meeting materials, et cetera. So.
You know, after we had some comments from the night meeting recently, I started thinking, since I know that we weren't going to be able to approve the new application, obviously this year and maybe not next year. So I was thinking about talking to IS and maybe seeing if we can come up with a different layout view on the public facing site. So that's on my list to talk with Craig and then Shannon, who had done the previous web page for it. So I kind of was thinking this, you know, looking into that and seeing what we can do.
Cool.
Sounds great.
Couple of, had you finished, Rob? A couple of points. Number one, I'm maybe making this word up, stupefied at the number of volunteers that we had pre-COVID. I think Rebecca's 4,000 or something like that. I still, when I think about that, it's just hard to imagine. So I think you deserve some accolades, Rebecca, for sure, because so many of these volunteers are out there working in addition to spending inordinate amounts of time, the volunteers with Department of Emergency Management, Emergency Operations Center. I think they were very, and continue to be key and essential. So that's you, Rebecca. Thank you. And Dana, you know, these are tough times for all of us. I mean, who wants to sit around my dining room table, you know, doing this? But I think Gretchen, and I think I certainly think that Caitlin, you've kept the team together, and some are in, some are out, some are in, some are out. But I think it's working as well as we can be expected. And I thank you, Dana, for keeping that going.
Nice.
Thank you.
Indeed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, volunteers do seem to want to be a part of their government, so it's really remarkable to see how much they dedicate themselves to so many different causes.
We have a prime example of that sitting in our committee right now.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
If there are no other questions,
Yeah, we have 4 minutes to spare.
We have the county clerk in the room, and I believe she's ready to proceed if you all are ready for that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. Hello, Allison, and you have the floor.
I have Chief Deputy Rebecca in the room, our financial analyst, Sharon, who really knows most about all of this stuff, could not be here. So there's not much to say. It is what it is. It says what it says. We are reducing our budget 10%, including 5% straight across the board for everybody of salary. So everybody's losing 5% of their salary, including me, sadly. And we reduced, well, we froze 2 positions, which you can see that we won't be filling. It hasn't been a horrible thing yet because the court isn't quite back up to full running yet. And the only other thing, we took a little bit more out of jury because we don't believe there's any way that jury is going to be fully functioning next year. We just started our first jury trial. It went off without a hitch, but it was, you know, they're socially distancing in the courtroom. So the jury's in the gallery and other people are in the jury box. If you wanted to tune into room 271, just let me know because they like to know who's watching and why. But it's kind of interesting to see it. They're proceeding with a jury trial.
Wow.
That's all.
Oh, thank you. Questions of Allison?
Thank you, Allison. Thanks for working with the entire county, not just the board. Thanks for helping us get where we need to be.
Indeed.
It's a terrible situation. Nobody likes it. Nobody likes it.
We understood that from Chad yesterday also, the prosecutor.
Oh, right.
Allison.
Well, I haven't heard a peep out of my people, I'll be honest. And I think part of the reason is, one of the questions they ask is management taking the same 5%? And I said, everybody, it's across the board. We are all feeling this pain. And I think that's the only fair way to do it.
Did you have something, Commissioner Gelder?
No, I think I've answered my own question by looking at the description. So it's the reduction is achieved by a reduction of hours.
Yes. Yeah, that's the only way to do it. Except for me, I have to like donate my salary.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because I can work as many hours as I want or not.
Hear you. Thank you.
Allison, this is Steve Maxim. I got a question regarding the overall budget for the jury duty. Is it 259, 693? Is that the overall budget that you proposed, or is that the new budget after you took the cut?
Oh, that's a good question. That's the old budget. The new budget would be the 226-811.
Okay. And it looks like maybe there's some more savings in that category, that budget category, if you will, assuming we don't have any increase, if you will, in jury trials.
Correct. And that's one of the things that we don't know, obviously, how it's going to look. I mean, right now, the Supreme Court gave us the authority to start up jury trials months ago, but we weren't ready. Well, some portions of us weren't ready, but I mean, the jury, we were ready. We planned this out. We figured out what we had to do, and we were ready. And when this started, I mean, I was surprised how little, how few glitches there were. It worked out okay, but I just, might be wrong. There might be fewer jury trials than I imagined. There might be more. It's always kind of a guesstimate when you're talking about juries.
So Allison, I have a Steve, I'm sorry, had you finished?
I'm done. Thank you, Commissioner.
It was either Frank from the court administration or it was Chad, our prosecutor, I'm not sure, but one of them I believe I heard yesterday, said that they're anticipating being able to handle 2 jury trials at a time, let's say for 2021. Do you have the staff with the cuts that you've just described to us to work this, to accommodate this?
Well, yes, what we do, and we work very closely with the court, obviously, but we tell them, they'll like bring in the first jury in the morning, the second jury in the afternoon, or bring the next jury in the next day, so that they're running 2 jury trials at once. They can't do more than that because of the needing to socially distance, needing to have a courtroom where you can have the witnesses waiting or appearing. And that, so their limitations more so even than ours. But we have only 1 jury clerk, but we have several people who can back her up when it comes to checking in. So we're okay on that.
Thank you.
But you do, and I'm sure you all understand that because Superior Court thinks they can do 2 juries at once, we also service all the municipal courts and the district court. So yeah, it could get real dicey if it ever really ramps up, which it will again eventually, but I don't think it will for a while. We'll see.
Commissioners? And Allison, I do want to point out, looking at the last 4 or 5 years, relative to the jury budget, which is within services that pays for things to support the trials, typically we average about around $60,000, $80,000 a year in additional requests. And we don't really know where we're going to land until the 4th quarter. So we could be tracking really well, but it's kind of crapshoot in terms of, the dynamics of each jury trial. And so, I mean, there's so many unknowns as we head into each year. And then on top of that, we have this COVID situation with the restrictions, the social distancing, the limited number of trials that we can actually do. So I would just back Allison up saying that, it was a very conscious reduction. They didn't want to take a large reduction that was going to be inequitable relative to experience. So, I mean, that's why you see most of the reduction with staffing. But I do want to call out that the typical request is around about 60, 80,000 additional to support the jury trials.
That's right. It's like I said, it's just a guesstimate. This year, I know we're coming in way under, and next year I anticipate the same. And I think at least the first quarter, probably well into the second quarter, will still be down. And then what's going to happen, I don't know. I mean, the court system is radically changed because of this, and whether or not the court system is going to embrace these changes and continue with some of them, or whether they're just going to snap right back into where we were before COVID, no one really knows. I know for us, one thing that's really, really encouraging to me, and Ed, you'll like this, the state has decided that e-filing needs to be a statewide venture, and they're going to start that. And we are right behind Snohomish, which was the beginning of the Odyssey courts to go with e-filing. They are up and running. So we should first quarter, maybe second quarter next year, have e-filing that links directly with Odyssey. And that's very, very exciting. And that will, that will change our workload. It won't eliminate it or diminish it, but it will diminish some sections of it. We'll have less scanning, but we'll have more people having to man this e-filing. Anyway, it's very exciting to me.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
And it will cost us almost nothing.
Of course, Allison, that's very good to hear. Of course, the federal courts have been doing this for years in terms of e-filing. When do you see this kicking off?
That I cannot tell you, but I know that when the Bonnie Dyseth, who's the head down there of IS, when she spoke to us about it, she said, I'm not talking about pie in the sky down the road. She said, I'm talking about getting it organized this year and starting it next year, probably even first quarter.
Very good.
So that's what she said, but there's things they have to put in place because they're talking about maybe implementing several counties at once. So, I mean, just the fact that they're actually talking now, and it's actually, it's not vapor anymore. It's actually something that looks like it's going to happen. It makes me, I am beyond cautiously optimistic. I'm actually optimistic.
Thank you.
Good to know.
I've never heard an elected official say, I'm beyond cautiously optimistic.
Yeah.
That's a new one.
You heard it here. Any other questions, comments?
No, thank you.
Hi, good morning, Allison. This is Matt Pickering. I'm sitting in as an employee rep this year again.
Good morning.
And I'm glad that you brought up the Odyssey software. You had mentioned last year you were concerned about that being a slowdown for you and your staff. And so I'm glad to hear that that's an optimistic outlook this year. That's a huge change from the notes I have from last year. But as an employee rep, I just want to commend you and your staff for quote, taking one on the chin. You're completing your tasks and the requirements of your staffing positions. And I just appreciate that you all collectively came to an agreement on how to handle that. So it's not overlooked that that's a big impact, and so we appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you. It is a big impact, and it's, it hurts me to have to do that because my people work hard and they deserve every dollar they get. And it's just a darn shame, but it is what it is.
Yeah, as I was listening to you, I was looking at my note and thinking, she already feels overwhelmed with this Odyssey thing. So for that to flip, that's a good narrative change there. So I'm really glad to hear that optimism.
Thank you.
Indeed. Other questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Bentley. I'm a citizen here in Port Orchard, and just hearing about those cuts, it's really rough thinking about those people and their families. You don't know what other situations are going on in terms of other family members out of work in this crisis, and could cause a lot of heartache for these folks. So I was just curious if any work had been done with the budget office or the commissioners, or if it's even possible. Is there ways to repurpose any folks or anything that could be done to try to avoid those reductions? As maybe other departments could be short-staffed and that sort of thing. Just
I'll take it. David, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like in their conversations, They really leveraged a vacancy and then a future vacancy. So when we had these talks in late April, early May, they knew of a pending retirement. And so they tried to leverage the vacancies first. They still have a pretty large budget. So it's commendable that they're able to get to the 10%, but I think that rather than laying off another position, because certainly, you know, the 155 there, that's probably equivalent of 2 more positions. And I think what they're thinking is we probably can't function with that many head count down. So that would be probably detrimental to the office. So they're spreading it across the board. And I'll have to say it's pretty cool. Our financial system Workday, it's brand new this year, and we had to have a meeting to figure out how to get Allison to donate some of her money back in the financial system. That's not something that we had set up, so that was kind of cool work to go through and to hear about it that way, because I hadn't heard about that. That was, you know, from the top down that they were doing it.
And just for additional perspective for everybody that's listening on this call and participating, is that, you know, for the clerk, the reduction that was requested for this year for 2020 was 5%, but it was really like 10% because, you know, this thing started to evolve about mid-year. And so if you think about it, 5% reduction on an annual budget for the last 6 months is effectively 10%. And in terms of what the clerk had available was an opportunity to take advantage of some employees on leave, as well as a better understanding of jury cost, because, you know, there's been about a 4 or 5 month break. And so the clerk was able to, you know, take that as an opportunity to reduce their budget for this year. And then as you pivot into 2021, those options really weren't available. And so, you know, there was a lot of thought and conversations that went into how to best absorb that. And I don't want to put any words in Allison's mouth here, but I think she wanted to stretch it out and lessen the burden as much as she could. So Allison, I don't know if you want to expand on that at all, but.
Well, yes, and I don't think that's exactly what Bentley's asking. I think he's looking at not just our department, but look at every department, just saying county-wide, are there things that have been done? And I will tell you, Bentley, that we have a couple of employees who were kind of immunocompromised, and it was difficult for them, and they were maybe looking at having to take some leave without pay. But we did move them into the emergency management because they were looking for volunteers to come and work for them. And so those people are getting paid half of their salary by emergency management and able to stay home at least half their time and protect themselves. So we do look for that, and we have people. We have a lady who recently had children, and she stepped her time back and said, I want to stay home a little bit more. So we utilize that. Her husband is fully employed. But we did everything that we could, and we are aware of the problem, of course, is that probably every, not nearly, but every department is in this same bind. But we did utilize the emergency management folks for a couple of our people to help them out.
As part of our budget deliberations this year too, we typically, after this week of meetings, we do this on an annual basis. The following week, next week, we would meet and sort of make decisions with the board, all right there, done in September, wrap it up, and, you know, wait till December to adopt the budget. We've set out a much longer schedule to continue to get more information, see what sales tax is doing, see what is happening with grants. You know, we're still waiting on several notices from the state as to what the true impact to some of our grant funded operations are. So I think our ability to stretch out and wait to make final decisions about how we balance the budget will be key here. You know, one thing I had thought about the clerk's office when we go into deliberations is like David said earlier, jury costs is a guess, but, you know, through November, maybe we see what experience it's going to be like once they've got these jury trials going. And so that could be a decision that, you know, we could talk about. We could weigh those staff reductions relative to how jury's doing. You know, it's all in the same funding level within the clerk's office. So that could be something that we could talk about with the board as well.
Good explanation.
Chris, this is Steve. I got to go. I'm
Go
sorry,
ahead.
Commissioner, go ahead.
No, that's all right. Go ahead.
All right, I got a question regarding the, Chris, regarding the jury duty budget, if you will, and kind of using it as, if you will, leverage against other costs if the jury duties don't increase. But my question is, can that money be rolled into next year?
Right. Yeah. So in any general fund budget, any elected official in the general fund has, let's use $1 million as an example of spending authority. If they don't spend that money in the course of the year, it falls to fund balance. And then in prior years, we've had talks about reappropriating that money for other one-time type things. But yeah, if it goes unspent, it goes to fund balance.
Well, what my point is that this backlog of juries, if you will, reflecting on what Chad said yesterday, we've got a dam, and you know, the juries are going to break loose someday. It might be advisable just to make sure we've got some money we can roll in, just in case we do have an increase in jury duties in next year. That's my only comment.
You bet. Yeah, that was sort of the budget office and the board's overall strategy with making a decision early in 2020. Our goal was really to not spend down reserves in 2020. If we could, and that's right now I'm pretty confident that we can get to there where we're not going to spend down reserves in 2020. That a big part of that is because of the CARES federal dollars that we're going to get to offset some of these costs in terms of maintaining their emergency operations center. But I think if we get to the end of 2020 without spending reserves, it will be a win, and we do have a decent amount of reserves that we can leverage, you know, once things start to look better.
Thank you.
One thing I just wanted to mention, and I'm sure everybody knows it, I know the commissioners know this, and I'm not sure if the citizen and employee representatives know this. We were declared right in the beginning essential workers, and we have been here in the office pretty much every day since day one.
Thank you.
And
I'm
just,
happy. I'm happy I got to go to work.
And to kind of go back to Bentley's other question, that we did have the ability and made a concerted effort to try to redeploy staff as best we could, so that as we were kind of adapting to the changing environment and various roles were shifting, really tried to redeploy them to emergency management, part of that joint command, doing different roles such that we could kind of keep those individuals whole. But one of our challenges is that the funding that we have for doing that is some of it's coming to an end. And a big portion of that will be ending November 30th. So we've been doing that the best we can, and then as we can start to morph and come back in, but this is looking into a year, 2021, where that funding resource won't be available.
Any other questions for Allison? Allison, any more words of wisdom? You've given us quite a few.
Well, thank you very much, Commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Charlotte,
Allison.
it's not a question, but if there's a takeaway for me this morning so far for the public, it's Chris's statement just now that he's pretty confident we're not going to spend down the reserves in 2020. I'd like to get that in writing, Chris, also. but I'm being very serious. I think that says a lot for our team, the whole team. As conservative as the budget balancing or budget preparation has been. So good job. I think the whole team. I feel like I'm full of kudos this morning, but I really mean that, Chris. You said you're pretty confident.
Yeah, in the last recession, we were probably, I mean, you don't know until you know, and then at a certain point, you're like, we've spent down too much reserves, where we had to borrow money from Public Works to make payroll, just because we didn't have enough cash in the bank to ebb and flow with cash flow, because, you know, property tax payments are in April, and October. And so we had funds, but cash flow is an issue as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Allison, and to your staff.
Thank you, Chairperson Garrido. Are we off the hook?
You are if you wish to be.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up we have the Parks Department, and I believe the Parks folks are all in the room.
Oh.
So welcome to the fun, and the floor is yours.
Excuse me.
Okay, so is Mr. Dunwoody going to start us?
You're on mute, Jim.
Oh, got here. Good
There you
morning.
are.
How are you today?
Just as good as you are.
Okay. Sorry to hear that. Hey, when we started developing the budget for 2021, we actually made some pretty significant changes this year as we entered the park season. So we took the approach that we cut our budget in 2020 by 10% by mid-year, taking into account that we are going to, of course, meet the county's request of 5%, but also acknowledging that our revenue, our anticipated revenue was going to be lower than what we had intended for 2020. So a lot of the changes that we've made already made it not easy, but palatable on developing our 2021 budget on meeting the county's request at a 10% cut. So some of the ways that we've accomplished it was we did have layoffs. We laid off 3 employees. We did not fill 2 maintenance positions and reduced the hours of another employee. So most of the money that we saved in 2020 were staff related. There were some changes that we made operational. We combined all our youth athletic activities into one location, so we didn't have to irrigate 2 or 3 different locations. We can concentrate our resources on one, and it has paid off so far. And we also reduced some of our park operating seasons. We actually had a reduced season for Horseshoe Lake all planned, and then the water quality at Long Lake and the weather, the hot temperatures actually kind of forced us to keep that park open as water access in South Kitsap was a little limited. So we've been able to accommodate most of our cuts through personnel for the positions. As you know, that I'm retiring early next year, and I've attempted to make sure that the cupboard isn't bare for my successor. I would like to have positive adjectives used when my name comes up and not negative. So there are some critical positions included in our 2021 budget that will give that person the opportunity to carry through some thoughts and reorganization for the department. Some of the challenges that we've had for this year, which leads into 2020, is the time that is necessary to clean the parks. We're going into each restroom, spending a good bit of time with backpack sprayers, sanitizing the restrooms. We've also had to take our material supplies and garbage collection has doubled over what historically we have on a regular basis. Part of that is, all of it is related to, we are experiencing more park visitors during the week than we do on the weekends. And the weekends we're always maxed out, but we're at capacity at the parks, and just keeping the parks clean and safe is our #1 priority. So we've been able to reallocate some monies around to make sure that we have the necessary supplies. I would hate to say we have to close a bathroom because we can't maintain it anymore. So we're able to do that. Our 2021 budget acknowledges that we need additional money for cleaning materials and supplies and some equipment, but we've been able to offset that, that increase by reducing mileage, some training that's not related to any type of certifications, and travel. So we've been able to make this somewhat cost neutral. So we are trying to take this opportunity with our facilities. It's not too often that we have some downtime in our facilities. So we've been making quite a few interior changes to our facilities that when we can start accommodating some larger groups, we'll be ready to go. I don't know if Alex is on, that she could pop up a picture, but we've converted the Van Z, which is usually just a food service area during the fair. We're changing that all around. We're changing the interior for take on wedding receptions, smaller parties. We've painted the interior of the President's Hall, which is a large building, but we've been able to do it. We've painted the interior of the Eagle's Nest. So we're making our interiors a little bit more attractive, things that we haven't been able to do for quite a few years. So we'll be able to have nicer facilities, or at least more attractive facilities available when things break open. The other thing that we've done in this year that's carrying over into our budget is we've somewhat changed the definition of our park crews. So we have a division of visitor services and we have a division of natural resources. So one is going to be focused on people and customer service, the other division solely on dirts and plants. So visitor services is now will be taking over all of our interior facilities, and then also the way we manage groups and respond to the cleanliness of our tables and chairs in our community rooms and the Eagle's Nest once we're able to rent that. So we're just making some modifications that actually gives the maintenance staff more time to spend out in the parks doing maintenance duties than rearranging furniture. So that's part of something that we started this year with Alex Hardy coming on, and that we're continuing in 2021. So there you have it.
Great. Short and sweet. Questions?
Is Alex able to share her screen or any photos? Jim kind of put her on the spot there.
Let me see. I was trying to figure out if I could share my screen, but I don't know. Oh, let me see.
Colorful.
All right, so here, let me get it open.
Eagle's Nest.
So this is inside the Eagle's Nest. If you recall where the lights are, that was all old oak. So we've gone through and refinished a lot of the woodwork in there to be more modern. We went with a white and gray theme as it ties in the checkered floor. Also kind of gives it that industrial vibe and is very neutral, so any event can come in and match their colors. And then this is the entryway for the Eagle's Nest here. Let me get it over. Again, this was all oak, so we have refinished this to brighten up the entryway to make it, again, just brighter. And we emptied the shelves in there too, so people who rent the facility can utilize that space for decorations. The Van Z is probably one of our biggest projects we're doing. So I'll show you kind of what it looked like previously. If I have that real quick. So previously the Van Z was just a kind of old barn like this. We used it for storage. So we're trying to turn it into a rental space that could be used for weddings and parties. So this is now what we have going on in the Van Z. So all my staff, my maintenance staff has built this. So we have cedar walls here. We're building this gazebo here in the middle so that we can host weddings. You can see the closet space back here. We've put wood framing on the walls, and we've now done that to this closet space over here as well. And then Crazy Eric's, where that was, has been turned into a nice kitchen space. We have also added this room. So for weddings, people are going to need a bridal suite. So we've built a space in here that's going to have mirrors, built-in outlets and plugs, so brides-to-be can get ready there on site. But again, we're just going with a very rustic barn vibe, and this has all been done in-house by my staff. A lot of it has been repurposed items. The mirrors, for example, we found for $7. So we're being very resourceful with our project updates. Here's a more current view of that room.
Lots of mirrors.
Yep. So again, we're trying to make it bright and really appeal to and attract places or people that we haven't been able to attract before. Also, we're doing landscaping on the outside of our buildings. So this is outside the P Hall, where before it was just overrun with bushes. So our landscaping crew has come in and cleaned it up. So the outside is appealing as well.
So you're going to end up having to update all of your marketing materials.
Yes, I have some big plans for that. The only one I'm missing is the President's Hall. We've also painted inside the President's Hall. And we're continuing the same gray trend in the President's Hall to so that it will be consistency throughout. And then with marketing, the other project we've had is we've created these Sasquatch figurines to place in our parks around the county with educational, like we'll put QR codes on them and have them linked to educational information, and also use it as a Facebook and Instagram marketing to drive pictures of people utilizing our parks. And again, my maintenance staff did this work as well.
Very cool.
There's no truth to the rumor that Chris modeled for those.
So that's all I have on my end.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks for all the hard work you do and your team.
Thank you.
Question for Jim, probably. Are you still there? Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Eagle's Nest. I recognize and am appreciative that the Eagle's Nest is really a community asset for our entire community. Having said that, I know we use it a lot for volunteers where we have our meetings. Do we have a positive cash flow of the Eagle's Nest, or is it a negative cash flow, or can you comment on that at all?
My educated guess is we have a positive cash flow on that facility. It's our most requested facility rental-wise throughout the park system. So I would say that's on the positive side of the ledger.
Thank you.
Other questions?
This is Bentley Simpson. I'm a resident here in Port Orchard, and I live in the Glenwood area, and we have lots of beautiful parks out here that are kind of being left without maintenance. Some questionable folks hang out around there throughout the day when you go to visit. I know there was some cleanup that was being prepared at the Coulter Creek Heritage Park, and then I heard possibly Wicks Lake, and further maybe Camp Calvinwood. I was just wondering where those cleanup efforts stopped. I'm sure they haven't continued throughout COVID, but if you foresee those continuing, and kind of that's.
Yeah, actually, we see it as larger work parties are allowed to go on. I know we've had some discussions. We've had some neighbors at Wicks Lake that will try to mobilize. One of the difficulties we've had is we're limited to work parties of 5 or less, and we have to provide a safety coordinator during their time. So right now we only have one volunteer coordinator, which made it a little difficult for all the stewardship groups that we have. That we've actually developed our own safety training program, so we could take some of our volunteers and actually train them as safety coordinators, so we can have 2 or 3 groups of 5 working on a project. So that's something that we're starting to put in place. I think we've trained 17 volunteers to take that on, but most of our parks are at the mercy of the community and volunteers to help us. I mean, we have over 6,000 acres in our heritage parks, and they're all managed and maintained by volunteers. So we started up some efforts. South Kitsap Regional Park, for the first time last year, we started to having some park stewards. So the virus has just kind of put us on our heels for a little bit, and we're making plans that we can move forward, but maybe a little slower than what we really want to do.
So how extensive is your training program?
It's online. I have not taken it, so I can't tell you exactly what it is, but it meets all the criteria of the state. We actually have a member of our park advisory board that provides that as part of his real job, and Josh Hopp, and he's actually helped us put that together.
Oh, good. Thank you. Other questions?
Yeah, Jim, this is Matt Pickering. I'm an employee rep, and I hadn't heard about the layoffs of your staff, so I'm sorry to hear that. I commend your department for finding and creating ways to generate revenue back to the county, though, so when we can return back to normal conditions, there's some revenue coming back in the rental of a new space to help mitigate the cost that resulted in the loss of employees. So I'm sorry to hear that. On a separate issue, with the closure of like the Port Gamble Heritage Park, because of conditions in this balance between natural resources and visitor services, obviously certain decisions go into what those uses are, right? You don't have to worry about natural resources in the Van Z building. But in open space, how do you mitigate the balance between a natural resource and a visitor use?
Well, we're changing the way we communicate with our park stewards. I mean, our park stewards are key, especially at Port Gamble, but all our heritage parks. What we're doing is actually taking the emphasis of our park maintenance staff for special events in our heritage park and turning it over to visitor services, the folks that know how to plan events. So one of the precautions that we'll be making with some of the large bike races and things of that sort are just safety issues, watching out for staying on the correct trails and things of that sort. So this whole department has been evolving over the years to more of a natural resource management agency. And there's probably a few steps that still have to go with that, but being concerned with the natural conditions right now throughout the park system, and we have 11,000 acres worth of trees out there. And our integrated forest management program has actually been able to address some of the concerns of getting rid of some of the underbrush and creating some spaces within trees. But we've probably included maybe about 800 acres throughout that program. So there's quite a bit of work still have to do over the years.
Great, thank you, I appreciate it.
Good question. It sounds like a really nice transition for lots of natural resources. Other questions, comments?
No, thanks.
All righty.
So if I could put David,
final-
if you're on there, thank you, David. David has been phenomenal in admin services and working with us and trying to decipher everything. So he's helped us through some rough patches, as well as Chris. So thank you all.
Thank you.
And I would just final thought there, given that this is likely Jim's final budget presentation in his career with Kitsap County, definitely wanted to take the opportunity to thank him for his time and dedication and really helping to help our park system really continue to evolve. Adding a whole bunch of acreage to it, really kind of changing the direction, supporting and being innovative has been great. And I appreciate the fact that for your last budget presentation, you did not let us down when it came to wearing your bow tie. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, he also brought us some very nice transitions.
I couldn't do without a tie. No, thank you. And with David, I mean, kudos. I've worked with some really phenomenal people in the Parks Department, and I'm very fortunate to be able to have worked with all those people. I mean, they're the ones that do all the work. I've just been very fortunate throughout the years to work with those folks. And maybe at some time I can get on the Citizens Budget Committee.
There you go.
We'll be looking for you.
I think there's a relationship that may prevent me from being on that.
Yeah,
So.
I'm not excited about that idea.
To be continued.
Thanks.
Well,
Thank you very much, Jim.
Yeah, thank you, Jim.
All righty, folks. I think that we can actually get the sheriff's office in a little bit early, but I suspect that they will require a good amount of time. So if everyone's okay with taking a short little break.
We'd love to.
Maybe it's 10 after, so maybe about 10:20 if we could be back. That gives us about a 10-minute break, and we'll get the sheriff's office all queued up and ready to go.
Thank you.
Does that work for you, commissioners?
Yes, ma'am.
See you back in 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I just moved John Giese over. So John, can you hear me?
Hang on. Yes, here we are.
Oh, good. Okay. So I have quite a few sheriff's office folks on the attendee list. If you click participants and then switch to the attendee tab, you can see who all is there. I just need to know who I need to bring over to do speaking, who might be speaking.
This group.
Okay, so all of the other folks that are on the attendee list are just observing and don't need to be moved over for speaking. Okay, got it. If that changes and you do want to bring somebody over to answer a question, just let me know and I can make that happen.
Now, Amber, the speakers that I've asked to be here today are the four that you can see on the screen besides myself.
Well, that makes it so easy on me. Thank you for that.
Well, that's one thing we're going to make easy, but that's it.
I have no comment.
Yeah.
Today I'm just, I'm tech support today. All right. So just hang tight and when everybody gets back from their short little break, we will get started. And you guys are the only folks for the rest of the morning, so you have up until lunchtime for your presentation. So take as much of that as you need, and if you finish early, then we'll shuffle some stuff around. But you are wide open until noon.
Okay. So Dave, you're gonna have to talk.
Also, remember you are not muted at the moment. So if you need to have discussions among yourselves between now and when the folks get back, make sure to mute.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Friendly reminder, the mute button. Thank you.
We about ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Welcome back.
Okay, do we have folks back?
Well, we have all three commissioners, and it looks like the sheriff's office is ready to rip.
Okay, sounds good. And with that, I will let Sheriff Simpson take it away.
Okay, good morning.
All right, good morning, commissioners and team. There we go. Now we're seeing what's there. I'm assuming we have several other people on board that are observing or watching, so we'll try to address or understand that as we go along. I'm appreciative that you recognize the complexity of our agency by giving us the extra time, more so than some of the other departments and electeds have had, because it is a complex and multifaceted operation, as you're fully aware of. With me in the room are several of our staff, the executive staff that have assisted in this exercise. Michelle's down at the end there with technical assistance. The Undersheriff Giesey's here. Steve Duckworth, Dave White, and Mark Ruthner. So I'm going to provide an overview of from my perspective, where we're at and what we hope to accomplish today and in the near future when you get into deliberations. And then I'm going to ask each one of them to give you a few more details about their divisions and what some of these proposed cuts are going to do to their ability to do their job. I know you heard the prosecutor's presentation a couple days ago, and our message is probably going to be very similar to theirs as far as the impacts and the difficulties in meeting the expectations of our communities. Commissioner Wolf made a comment in a few presentations a couple of years ago about us being in an emergency situation. And yes, we are in an emergency situation now. We are in a crisis. We are currently in a 24/7 operation while other agencies and other departments are closed down and not even available to the public. The 911 responses in our jail have continued to have to work under these COVID situations. I want to thank the staff that's here publicly for what they've done in preparation for these exercises. I also wanted to point out that this will be Dave White's last participation in our exercises and our budget presentations, as he is going to be retiring at the end of this month after 40 years. That's 40.
Oh my.
Service to the community, to Kitsap County and the Sheriff's Office. So between now and then, take the time to acknowledge that service, if you would. It's been a long, dedicated service for him, and I'm going to miss him personally, but and professionally as well. I also want to thank David Flint. He's been an advocate for the Sheriff's Office in helping us understand what's going on with the numbers, working with each of the division chiefs and Michelle to put our work together. So we're looking forward to getting past this process. We're not excited about it, but it is something we have to do. You know, 2020 has turned out to be quite an interesting year, not just for Kitsap County, but for Washington State, across the country. And this COVID stuff is affecting the entire world. I have never seen anything like this, or have been faced with the challenges that we are facing today. I've never seen that in the 36 years that I've been around here. You know, over the several years, we've endured a variety of challenges: the attacks of 911, the Bangor White Train protests, the 2008 economic challenges, gangs in our communities, methamphetamine, heroin, legalization of marijuana, now the multiple social ills that are in our region, the increase of mental illness and substance abuse and homelessness have increased the complexities of our job and the crimes that we're expected to respond to and investigate. And whatever happens in other parts of the country is affecting us as well, as it seems to trickle into our communities. If riots occur in other parts of the country, or even in Seattle, people think that that's going to happen here. In fact, the results of those activities across the country in Seattle have caused local businesses to board up their businesses and started being prepared for protests that they expected to come around. And people are beginning to arm themselves with rifles and handguns as they participate or observe protests in Kitsap County. Yes, this is in Kitsap County as well. We've been dealing with multiple protests and public outcry to defund the police. Across the nation, there's been an increase in attack on law enforcement officers unprovoked. First responders are exposed to COVID every day on a regular basis, and COVID is killing as many officers today across the nation as any other line of duty death. In fact, we've had one line of duty death in Bainbridge Island. COVID is now amongst the list of recognized causes for line of duty death for police officers. It's forced us to take drastic measures in how we address our 911 calls for service. The regular interaction between our staff and the public has been reduced substantially. It's different, and we have to take precautions daily to protect ourselves, the public that we serve, and also the inmates and the jail staff. I recently learned the Department of Corrections is considering changing their sentencing guidelines, and they're proposing new legislation to reduce and allow people to leave the prisons early. This is a budgetary consideration, and it has nothing to do with public safety. They're not even thinking about the public in these decisions. They're looking at reducing or giving good time credit to felons, serious felons, 33 1/3% of their time off. If they're sentenced to 30 years, their sentence is automatically dropped to 20 years. And then if they have more good time or more service, other options, they may get out even earlier. These are proposals that are ludicrous and ridiculous, and it's going to put a major impact on local law enforcement if these things happen. While they suggest that they may have supervision in the communities, they can't supervise these people because there's too many and they don't have the staff to do it. So we've got to fight these types of things that are going on in the community. Well, these things may not seem to be our problem. They're going to be our problem, your problem, and everybody in the community's problem if these things occur. The decisions of others are having a direct impact on our ability to provide the services that we have to do. So what's the good news? Well, I don't have a lot of good news today, unfortunately. I'm not sure what the answer is, and I'm assuming that we'll survive, but the forecasted budget does not look good for us. When we were asked to take a 5% budget cut for this year, for 2020, it was not good, but at least it was something that we could manage with the understanding that most of our purchases, or many of our larger purchases, are held off towards the end of the year. So we have the ability to reprioritize throughout the year, depending on the emergencies and the circumstances that occur throughout the year. This year, we're going to have to forego some of the purchases at the end of the year that we expected to do. We're going to have to kick the can down the road even further until it gets to the point where it gets rusty and falls apart. When we were asked to make a 10% cut for 2021, it was a disaster that we were looking at. We looked hard and long at what the possibilities were, and the outcome does not look good. The cuts we've identified to meet this goal are significant and will be noticeable by our public. Once we understand what our final budget's going to be, I will have to provide a letter to the editor, a letter to our agency, so they will know what to expect and know why we're not going to be responding to many of the calls for service. Before I talk about the assumptions we include in our budget, I want to explain what drives our budget and what drives our work. We are primarily a responsive organization, are influenced by many other organizations and decisions made throughout the county and throughout the country. Our work is centered around and responsive to the changing behaviors in citizens, case law decisions, new legislation and legislative mandates, court schedules, prosecutor and defense counsel decisions and practices, citizen expectations and ongoing complaints, and other law enforcement agency changes. As our populations increase and change, there's been an increase in citizens' expectations accompanied with decreased resources. Our focus for providing protective law enforcement and a reduction in crime, we've had to change our focus to identifying the very basic and essential services and nothing more. We've gone from a preventative model into survival mode as we look to how we will respond to very basic and essential services in the future. We made many assumptions in preparing our budget and are appreciative of David Flint's assistance in putting this information together. The assumptions and perspectives we took into consideration as we prepared our numbers were, we expect COVID to be a temporary situation and a temporary setback and not something that's going to last forever. We expect it to recover. These are temporary measures and not expected to be permanent. As the economy improves, we expect our budget will improve at a similar rate. To meet the 10% goal that we were asked to deal with, we focused on identifying basic essential services, as I've indicated, and we're identifying the impacts these cuts and the absence of non-essential services are going to have to the community. Cuts to these services include no participation in non-essential events such as parades. We will not be participating in community events or the fair, neighborhood watch programs, national night out. We're going to be closing our mall office. We're going to be suspending our community resource officer's job. The cadet and COP programs are going to be on hold. We're going to have to limit canine demos and school visits. These are events and activities that actually build community spirit. They build community trust in our government, but we're going to have to cut them to meet the essential service. Our response to every 911 call is going to include added scrutiny into what we can or will do. Our limited staffing is going to directly affect our ability to respond responsibly and safely to the calls for service. Similar to how our hospitals deal with ER rooms, we're going to have to triage every call that comes into the sheriff's office and decide whether we can or cannot respond to it. Life-threatening and in-progress calls will take priority, and depending on the staff that's available at the time, other calls may result in a phone call to the citizen or no call at all. Misdemeanor and property crimes will not be a priority. If staff's available at the time and nothing else is going on, we'll respond to it as we can. Burglaries might be investigated if a suspect can be identified. If not identified, it may just be a phone call or an online report. Complaints about drug houses, requests for increased traffic enforcement, dealing with homeless camps will be addressed only if and when we can based on the staffing at the time. Over the years, we've had a strategic plan which has improved our services and our relationship with our community greatly. And we have appreciated the commissioner's support in funding some of these programs that we've wanted to put together to build a better and stronger organization and ability to service our communities better. The 2021 budget provides a difficult for us to continue these relationships, and we've hit a roadblock with no available detours. There's a ripple effect in everything that we do. Many of the changes we'll be faced with are due to changes other departments are making, such as what I talked about with DOC releasing inmates early. It's going to have a direct impact on our community. King County has decided not to participate in the chain, which is with the transportation service that they provide for moving inmates throughout our region. They're not going to be doing this anymore, which means we're going to have to take 2 corrections officers to transport inmates to and from local jurisdictions, leaving us with that burden. As the Criminal Justice Training Center shifts its on-site trainings to online trainings, we're challenged with having to figure out how to train these personnel at a local level. With the passing of Initiative I-940, or what we call the Law Enforcement LaTexA, or Law Enforcement Training and Community Safety Act, all officers have additional training that they have to do on top of the existing training requirements that we have to do on an annual basis. Every member of the independent investigative team that will be investigating officer-involved shootings or other critical incidents are going to have to provide or be provided with additional training to be certified to be on these committees, on these investigative teams. This has been set up by the new law and new legislation. Corrections officers are now going to have to attend the academy for 2 weeks longer than before so that they can be certified. This is a good thing as far as the training, but it is going to impact our ability to have people back into service earlier. While our communities are demanding more and more training for police officers, and we're expected to do more to offset the impacts of officer-involved shootings or the use of force, how can we consider less training, yet we're expected to cut that budget? To be proficient in the tasks that we're expected to do these days and the demands on us from our public, we should be training more than ever. We should not be taking a $4 million cut. We should be looking at a $4 million addition to our budget, not going backwards. The ripple effect of COVID has changed things in the jail as well. With the cooperation of the prosecutor's office and defense counsel, we've been able to reduce our daily population from around 400 to 420 inmates per day down to a little over 200. This is because of COVID and wanting to separate people and keep our staff and inmates safe. I apologize, getting dry. We're expecting that once the courts open up and the prosecutors are able to start processing trials again, that the population will begin to return to the 400 level. We're budgeting and hoping that this will stay down around the 300 level so we can manage it. And if COVID continues longer than it has been, we still may be at those 200 levels and have a major problem in trying to facilitate what the courts and the prosecutors are going to need. And as the prosecutor said on Monday, if they can't prosecute the cases because of the backlog of cases, they're going to have to let these people go out to our community, and that's where they're going to sit and they're going to start committing more crimes. I believe our challenges are temporary suspension, and I hope we can recover sooner than later. The longer this goes on, the longer the tide is going to the longer it's going to take for the tide to turn, the harder it is going to be for us to recover and rebuild back to where we've been at before. Excuse me, last comment before I move on. Our proposed budget is as lean as I've ever seen it before. I've been working with the budget process for a number of years since I've been a sergeant, an administrative sergeant, putting budgets together, and this is the worst that I've ever seen it come to our area. There's no room for discretion, there's no room for error, there's no room for priorities or emergencies. If an emergency occurs and something breaks and we need to have it replaced, we're going to have to come back and ask for budget adjustments. I'm hoping this pandemic will leave us quickly so we can begin to recover, but I don't see that happening in the near future. I wish I could offer a better message, as I said at the beginning, but I think it's my responsibility to let you, the community that we serve, and our civilian staff and our commission staff know what we're facing. We did what we're asked to. We prepared a bare bones budget, which is extremely risky to our agency and personnel and the community. I believe what we're looking for is much more than what we can bear and is unreasonable. I hope that as the budget deliberations continue, the process will focus on public safety and what the public needs and is expecting. Public safety needs to be a top priority and taken into consideration as these difficult decisions are made. It's the county's motto to live where you work. We're all proud of where we work, and we want to continue working as diligently as we have. And even in difficult times, we still focus on our mission, our vision to be recognized as a respected and trusted sheriff's office, working with Kitsap County community to make it a safer place to live, work, and visit. Everyone wants that to happen. But given what we know today, 2021 will be a very tough year to live up to this motto and this vision. I think that's enough for me, so let's move on to the undersheriff, who's going to share a little bit about his perspective and some information he has to share with you, and then he'll pass the baton on to our division chiefs to share with you some of the further impacts and concerns that we have on an individual basis. Thank you for your time. I do look forward to what's going to happen in the monitoring, in the deliberations. We will be there to answer questions, and we'll help you make those difficult decisions, but I sincerely ask, heartfelt ask, that you consider public safety as a primary responsibility this year and make sure that we're funded to be able to do the job that we are expected and have to do. I have no other options. When someone calls 911 for help, I can't say wait in line. We'll be with you when we can find somebody. We have to be available to respond to these issues. So thank you. Under Sheriff Giese.
Thank you, Sheriff. Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, Budget Committee. How are you? A few minutes, I just want to talk a little bit about how we came to the reductions in our budget that we came to and some of the methods we used and how that looks really when you talk about our budget overall in some of the discretionary spending and some of the staffing. First off, talk a little bit about the process we used. For those who are listening in and aren't aware, all departments were asked to take a 10% cut in expenditures and given a target amount of dollars that would equal. For us, that was $4 million cut. And we went about the task in good faith, and we looked throughout our budget where we could absorb some cuts. Many of these areas don't make a lot of sense for us to cut, but we put in cuts trying to reach our target, and we came very, very close. But let me run through just a few here. And I know you have a sheet up there that kind of lists a few of them, but if you would, go back up to the top sheet just for a second for me, if you could, that show the overall revenues and just a little further, thank you. So I guess it's the comment I'd like to make there is that's a basic summary, but it really doesn't get into the nuts and bolts of what we cut. And I just want to explain a few of the impacts it's going to have to some of our areas that we spend. And you can now move back to the lower sheet, thanks. So I'm not necessarily going to follow along in this order, but you know, when we sat down and we said, what could we cut? We looked at our discretionary spending first because we wanted to protect our folks. Our staff are extremely valuable. They're really hard to recruit. We want to retain them, and we're losing them at a high rate right now with retirements and everything else. So we looked hard at our discretionary spending and what our budget reductions represent. First off, they represent almost a 20% decrease in overtime. Sheriff Simpson talked a little bit about what we may not be able to do this next year. We may not be able to do public events, provide security, traffic control. We may not be able to do a lot of the outreach programs, which right now are so critical. When you talk about criminal justice reform and police community relationships, just a horrible time to think about making those cuts. We're talking about significant staffing cuts. And, you know, it's counterintuitive to think you can cut overtime at the same time you're cutting staff, because usually when you see reductions in staff, that's when you see more overtime. So we penciled in almost $250,000 worth of savings in overtime, but it's going to be extremely hard for us to reach that goal. It means a lot of impact. What else does it mean for our budget? A 50% decrease in our training budget. Again, really, really hard to swallow, especially now when you're getting all these calls for criminal justice reform, and almost every single one of them include more training for officers. We have a need to train more. We have a need to have better trained officers, well-equipped officers. We have a lot of new officers coming into our department that need additional training. And this is really a tough one for us to swallow, but we took a knife to it, and you know, it will be hard to obtain the training we need. Too much lack of training, where that impacts us not only as the quality and capability of our folks, but it also puts accreditation and other things at risk for us. So a tough cut. What else did we have? 40% reduction in professional services budget. So what does this affect? This could be people that we bring in to provide training to us, and we've had some very good high caliber training in the last few years that really the only way it was possible is for us to either spend the money to bring in these people in these classes or share that cost with other agencies. What that also represents is just this last year, we were having this discussion with you folks, and we talked about how in our profession we finally kind of realized that we need to take care of our folks, because not only is it important for them to have healthy lives, but it's important for us as an agency to keep people in good shape, both mentally and physically. We talked about how suicide and PTSD is a prevalent problem in our profession. We probably also talked about, and if we didn't, we've lost several deputies and corrections officers in the last couple of years through PTSD. We had an active duty corrections officer commit suicide just a few years ago. Last year, you gave us $25,000 into our budget to help address some of these wellness needs. And we were going to use that money for additional training, for contracting with psychological services to help our folks. Really an attempt to try and address some of the needs that are still there. But that went away in the mid-year cut in 2020, and it's not going to be in our budget in 2021 with these cuts. You know, we understand the economic situation. We understand the economic impact that we're having right now, but the need for that services has not gone away. What else are we looking at? 80% cut in our advertising budget, which was meant for recruiting. You know, again, it's a dog-eat-dog world to recruit good police officers, and we're making a cut there. A 20% overall reduction in supplies and services, over $500,000. You know, everywhere in our budget, we made cuts. 30% cut in our equipment budget. It's expensive to have police officers and corrections officers. We need a lot of equipment. There's a need to cycle that equipment out when it gets old. The further we push that back, the harder it is to catch up. So just a lot of impact throughout our budget. Another one is $100,000 in our repairs budget. We have older facilities. They need repair. It's constant. And again, we've had these chats with you every year, trying to fix and keep up our buildings and our facilities so they're in good repair is tough. And we're taking a big cut, which is again going to throw maintenance back. Those were just some of the areas that I think you really should see and hear about. You know, a couple other things. We were lucky that our ERR fleet rate is going to take a reduction of a couple $100,000 this next year. That was some capacity that our folks in the budget office and ER found, which will help us reach our budget goal of reductions. One of the other areas of reductions in our interfund was several years ago, we were granted a peak process improvement analyst position to be dedicated to our department. That was because we believed wholeheartedly in the peak process and process improvement. That was also to help us with strategic planning and project management. We have a lot of large technology projects that we have been running the last couple of years, and we have forecast for the next couple of years. We gave up that position. Again, a valuable position, but it's one we had to give up if we were going to reach a $4 million reduction. So those are just some of the cuts that we came up with. Big impacts, really, and throughout our budget and throughout all of our divisions and all of our members are going to feel these cuts, and the public too. So with all that, we came to about $1 million out of the $4 million. Only thing we had left was staffing. So right now, we were asked mid-year to take a 5% cut in our budget. To achieve that, we froze a lot of the positions we had open. Right now, we have 10 positions open that are spread throughout our department. If we were to keep those open going into and through to 2021, it'd probably add another $1 million to the savings. Still not close to that $4 million budget goal. So what we did is we figured if we had to lose staff, how many staff would it be to get close to that budget goal of $4 million? And we came up with 8 additional staff positions. The way we've penciled that in is 7 patrol positions and 1 corrections officer position. One thing we do believe is, and our primary goal was not to lay off anybody. We don't think that's good business. We don't think that's horrible for morale. You're basically cutting people who are just trained, ready to do the job. And you know, the problem is we have so much attrition right now. We've been losing, on average, 14 people every year the last 3 years through attrition. We have a lot of people that are retiring. People leave our profession, they take other jobs. So we knew the attrition would keep up with the amount of losses and the amount of positions that we would probably need to fill to hit those 8 positions. So we felt we could do that just through attrition. Now, by putting the positions in patrol and corrections, we parked them there, but quite honestly, we would like to have the latitude in 2021 if we have to absorb these cuts to move those positions around. Some of it was a guess on who might be leaving the agency next year. But again, we know a lot of people leave our agency every year, and we worry that it'll actually be worse this next year. So what does that mean overall? You know, I guess I think the struggle for us is we've worked collaboratively with you as commissioners, you as a budget committee over the last few years to try and build up our ranks to keep pace with the service requests and the growth in our county. And we just hit the point last year where we finally had the amount of deputies that we had in 2010. We took 10 years to build back from the recession last year. And unfortunately, if we take the hit in the budget and in the deputy positions that we've penciled in, we're bouncing right back to 2010, 2011. Horrible situation, and it's tough for us. And our folks struggle with it, and we struggle with it. And I know we've worked collaboratively to try and build that staff, but it is tough to even consider taking these staff cuts. And you know, the trouble we have is we need staff in all of our areas. Everything's critical. Sheriff Simpson talked about core business, and we will have to kind of draw back people from some of our specialty units. In addition to the ones that Sheriff Simpson mentioned, I'll probably lose a public information officer. That's something we just probably have to give up that position either to hit a budget reduction or to help shore up the core business of our patrol function. So, I mean, we've struggled to build staff because we want to keep up with what's the expectation of our communities. We think right now it's tough if you live in East Bremerton, Kingston, even Hansville, that we're not meeting the service needs people expect, much less Silverdale. And Chief Duckworth is going to talk more about Silverdale and the impacts there. But we do not provide the services at the level that I think people expect, and you know what you would see in some of our other small cities. So anyway, so I guess in closing, I would just like to say that again, we know you've worked collaboratively to build staff positions. And if you look at the chart just above, you can see that we actually have built staff in the last few years. You know, we've also been lucky. I mean, some of those have been granted by the commissioners and the budget committee to help us build staff slowly back up. But we've also been lucky that some of those have been grant funded positions, and those are kind of tenuous. You know, they've been doing great work, but they require us to get the grant again and again and again. You know, it's also a little bit inflated in one of those bar graphs in 2019. We moved 6 court security positions from DAS over to our budget. Those weren't new positions, they just moved from one budget to another. So it looks like we've gone up a little higher than maybe what we really have, but we have finally crawled up to a point which we still don't think is adequate to serve the needs, but at least got us back to 2010. So I guess just one final reflection is I know that you want to work collaboratively with us, and I know that you have tried hard to build our department over the last few years and keep pace. Normally when we come in through this process, and a lot of us has been through this process for quite a few years with us, normally we come in and we ask for additions to our budget to help us do just a little bit more. I guess this year we're doing it a little differently. This year we're coming to you and say, please help us don't take these reductions because it's just too much, and help us prioritize county spending and keep our staff. I really worry about how many people we lose every year, and a further reduction in frozen positions could snowball easily with other issues like people out on light duty, long-term leave. We could really be in a horrible situation for staffing. And unfortunately with staffing, I think the other big thing is cuts this year affect us for 2 or 3 years. It just takes a long time to recruit, background, train, and get people ready for solo patrol. It can take up to 1.5 years. So cuts we talk about here in 2021 are really cuts that we'll see up until 2023, even if those positions are restored next year. So anyway, thank you, commissioners. I think at this point, what I'd like to do is have each division chief kind of speak to the impacts of the proposed reductions would be, and afterwards we'll answer any questions. Thanks.
Okay.
I'll turn it over to Chief Steve Duckworth here at this point.
Thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody. For those who don't know me, my name is Steve Duckworth, and I've been Sheriff Simpson's Patrol Division Chief since 2015. I've been asked to provide the challenges being planned for 2021 and beyond from the perspective of the Kitsap County Sheriff's Office Patrol Division. What you're going to hear from me today is about people. It's about providing our employees with a safe, properly staffed Sheriff's Office, and it's about providing the communities that we all serve with the level of service they expect and deserve. Law enforcement calls for service have become more complex and more dangerous than they were 28 years ago when I started. The complexity is evident by the constantly changing laws and mandates, and the dangers could not be more evident than in the recent assassination attempt of 2 Los Angeles County Sheriff's deputies who were just sitting in their car. Our patrol division is and historically been funded at a level capable of providing limited rural law enforcement services to our communities. Where we struggle is when our communities become more urban and when the community members expect a higher level of law enforcement service that we are simply not capable and not funded to provide. Officers per 1,000 residents is the long established, though imperfect, method of measuring and comparing law enforcement staffing levels. Per the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs, the statewide average ratio of Sheriff's Office Commissioned employees per 1,000 population was 0.86 in 2019. The highest being Garfield County, which was 3.60 per 1,000, and the lowest being Clark County, which was 0.62 per 1,000. For comparison, the Kitsap County Sheriff's Office staffing ratio was 0.69 per 1,000 population, the 5th lowest of the 39 counties in the state of Washington. For further comparison, the average for our 4 city police agencies in Kitsap County was 1.37 per 1,000, nearly double the staffing of the Kitsap County Sheriff's Office. In addition to the hiring freeze and the future cuts being asked, we normally struggle with a portion of our staffing unavailable to work a normal shift. Additional cuts will make staffing our shifts even more difficult and in some cases impossible to do without significant overtime. Included in our funded positions are one employee who's on extended military leave over 12 months. That number was recently 3, but we had 2 that since returned. We have 2 employees in the Basic Law Enforcement Academy that will be available to work patrol in the second quarter of 2021. We have 6 waiting to attend the Basic Law Enforcement Academy and will be available to work patrol in the third quarter of 2021. 6 are on long-term L&I time loss or light duty, and 1 is on a long-term administrative assignment. The challenge for the foreseeable future will be recruiting and hiring. From the moment we're given authority to hire an entry-level deputy sheriff, it takes approximately 15 months before they're trained and able to fill a position. For example, one of the deputies mentioned above, who was waiting to attend the Basic Law Enforcement Academy, was hired on June 22nd, 2020, and will likely work his first solo patrol shift in mid-September 2021. And that does not include the length of time for the hiring process. Due to the current hiring freeze, as deputy sheriffs retire and resign in 2021 and beyond, there'll be no pool of new deputies to replace them. Therefore, the hole left in the schedule will need to be filled with a specialty position or be left open, which will result in overtime. This could include moving our community resource officer and 6 traffic unit deputies from their specialty assignments to patrol. The move of the CRO would impact our participation in Kitsap County's behavioral courts, neighborhood watch programs, home outreach, community meetings, and the loss of the Kitsap Mall office. The move of the traffic unit could impact most of the traffic enforcement on county roads and severely limit our ability to investigate felony and fatality collisions on county roads. Due to recommended and agreed upon staffing levels to ensure adequate staffing spread throughout the county and for officer safety, the number of deputies on patrol at any given time is fairly inflexible. Even at full staffing, the Kitsap County Sheriff's Office Patrol Division is incapable of providing the level of service our communities expect, especially in our growing urban areas. This past summer, our ability to meet the expectations of Hansville and Kingston were a daily challenge for us. The opening of the St. Michael Medical Center and the Kitsap Transit Center in Silverdale have been an area of concern for the last several years during these budget meetings. Yet no additional resources have been provided, and there's no plan in place to address the additional calls for service or impacts to the surrounding areas, such as traffic congestion, collisions, transient population, behavioral health releases, and the security issues with staff and patients. The current projected impact, not including the surrounding area, is over 1,000 calls for service per year. In preparation for the looming staffing crisis, I presented the sheriff and undersheriff a 3-phased plan limiting the types of calls for service that the patrol division will be able to respond to. To begin with, we will continue limiting the calls for service we respond to that were implemented due to COVID-19. While this did lower our total calls for service for the first half of 2020 intentionally, and for the safety of our staff. As we move into 2021, these restrictions will ensure a safe working environment for our employees, while only making moderate cuts to the services we provide. If and when the staffing numbers drop due to attrition and no new deputies are available to fill the vacancies due to the hiring freeze, further cuts are being planned and the message to the community developed. The outlook with the current plan is bleak and expected to get worse in mid-2021. With no source of new employees to fill gaps left by attrition and a 15-month lag from hiring a functional employee, I expect mid to late 2021 patrol staffing to be at crisis levels. My fear is that any further cuts below our already statewide low staffing will result in a public safety crisis. The Kitsap County Sheriff's Office is barely keeping up the growing demands of our communities. With our current rate of attrition and the potential impacts of criminal justice reform, recruiting and retention need to be a priority. At a time when the Kitsap County Sheriff's Office should be increasing its commissioned law enforcement personnel in order to keep up the growing demands of our community, we are instead being told to cut staff. These cuts will take years to recover from, and in the meantime, service cuts from our communities will be key. Thank you for your time this morning, and once the presentation is over, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Who's next?
Good afternoon, or good morning, I guess. So,
Good morning.
still morning. Still morning. Okay.
I would ask that sometimes your microphone fades in and out, so if you can make sure that your microphone is close to you when you're talking, it'll make it easier for us to hear all your words.
I'll just slide down here a little closer to you then.
Thank you.
Okay. So, thank you all for being here, commissioners, and it's been a pleasure working with you over the years. I'm going to talk about the detective division, the support services, court security, and our special investigations and WestNet division. During the 2020 budget season, we worked hard with you to get our staffing in these divisions to a reasonable level. And I felt that we were there until this pandemic hit in March. Currently, the detective division as a whole has lost 16% of its positions due to vacancies, and that being 3 positions that were mentioned in the chart that was provided to you. Further cuts to the agency, that being on patrol and et cetera, will further affect the detective division. Patrol vacancies, as there's vacancies out there, if we have any further retirements of detectives, we will not be able to refill from patrol because there will be no one available to bring in. So the impact for further budget cuts or personnel reductions for general detectives will eliminate or reduce our ability to assist in our agency or outside agencies with latent fingerprint examination, except for serious violent crimes and felony investigations. Our ability to follow up on any kind of fraud investigations, identity theft, etc., will be basically none, unless it's something that has good leads. Our ability to assist patrol with processing of major burglary scenes, etc., with trained detectives will be severely hampered. Our ability to provide cell phone forensics for investigations will be limited, or video enhancement for the identification of any suspects, et cetera, in some of the crimes that occur around the county. We will have a reduced or limited presence or ability to be present for public presentations. Our ability to send out our evidence such as computers, phones, DNA, etc., to private labs which have more capabilities to analyze them will be very limited because they charge a lot of money for it, and the state cannot provide those services. And the services the state can provide for lab and for computer forensics take well over a year, sometimes 2 years to come back with the information. With the implementation of I-940 that the sheriff has related to or referred to, we have a ton of mandated training that the detectives will have to go through. Our ability to attend that training is going to be limited because of workload here and the lack of detectives to cover the daily responsibilities. And our ability to help the other agencies with a case or call out for an officer involved incident will be limited also. Our background investigations, which Chief Duckworth referred to, will further be slowed down when we are given the okay to begin the process for hiring. Deputies are hard to recruit and hire. In 2008, starting in 2008, I believe we went about 8 years without hiring a deputy. That was because a lot of deputies weren't leaving at that time. We're not going to see that this time. If we don't replace the vacancies as they come in, or replace the vacancies as soon as we know there's going to be one and start working on that, we'll never catch up. Property and evidence processing and dispositions, the destruction of old property, etc., will be hindered. Our investigative focus will be on crimes against persons. Property crimes will be a lower priority. Currently, we receive approximately 300 sex offense cases per year. 300, and that the majority of those are child molest. That equates to about 1.2 cases assigned every single day, every single work day to the detectives. With a continued reduction in our staffing, we won't be able to do anything besides the sex-related cases and the serious homicide, and the homicides, which are very serious. That will also affect our officer safety and wellness. Currently, our detectives are on call for a week at a time. With reduced staffing on patrol and the inability to fill vacancies in detectives, our detectives will be on call more, and we're going to experience the burnout effect, and their safety and health will be in jeopardy. Currently, we rely on grant funding for a detective position. We also have grant funding that from WASPIC also that supports our detective support coordinator. Both of these are for the sex offender program. The availability of federal grants to assist with staffing and items is being reduced. It's harder to get those federal funds. As we move over to the WestNet SIU area, in my estimate over the years, I believe that 80 to 90% of all 911 calls and investigations that we handle are drug, alcohol, or mental health related. If we don't have a drug investigation unit, crime's going to increase, bottom line. Again, and I'm concerned about the officer safety and wellness in the drug and special investigations unit. When they're out doing operations, they not only have to keep an eye out for the target of their investigation, the suspect of their investigation, but they also have to keep an eye on their back for one that's along that's looking to do harm to them. The nuisance and problem house investigations and the abatements that we do in the sheriff's office, many of which come from your office or that you're aware of, and that's in every area of the county. We've been very successful in prosecuting those cases and solving the problems. The ability to do those investigations is going to reduce. We're already going through reduced funding for WestNet from the federal government, but we have to keep providing the stats to the federal government in the future, because as I believe the funds will turn around, they'll start coming in again, and we have to be there to take it. If we don't participate in the federal burn grant and the funds are eliminated, we will never get them back, period. One of the grants there pays for the support coordinator out at WestNet right now. Our special investigations unit and WestNet has a lot of seizures. We have to provide the statistics for the forfeitures, and if we lose the forfeitures, we're losing a lot of operational money. There's a possibility of a probability of an increase in overall crime in Kitsap County. Over the past years, we've seen a decrease in some narcotics distribution, human trafficking, and some property crimes. I see that taking a turn and going back up. WestNet's reputation has been well taken by the community, and we've been responsive to the pleas of the community for drug houses, etc. The impact to the civil division will result in a delay in pistol transfers or CPLs. If we don't do the pistol transfers and complete them on time, the firearms dealers will release the firearms to the applicant whether or not the pistol transfer is completed. That could result in additional work by the deputies to go back out and recontact that person later after the pistol transfer paperwork is completed. We'll have the inability to provide additional support to the other divisions of the sheriff's office. There could be a delay in the service of civil process or writs of restitution. If we have a delay in fulfilling PDRs, it could result in court fines for the agency and the county as a whole. And plus the fact that we'd be delaying fulfilling various unfunded mandates that are given to us by the state. We would also be in jeopardy of having to close the Kingston office again to the North End citizens. We've been well received up there. Although we're only there a couple days a week, I believe it's an asset to the north end of the county. Also under the civil division now is the court security. We are understaffed for court security, but we are able to have contracts with the city of Bremerton and for a full-time FTE. And we will have probably a 25 to 30% position with Port Orchard that are fully funded. Budget impacts will also affect specialty units such as SWAT. Our SWAT team averages in excess of 12 call-outs per year. They come out when patrol or detectives need additional assistance or specialized abilities. They make it safer for all of our deputies and the public in general. Currently, in order to buy required equipment for the SWAT team, such as the ballistic vests that we spoke about not too long ago, I have to reach out to federal grants looking for money to do that. That's money that we should have locally to do without having to go to the feds to find. Further budget cuts could affect the ability to train for the SWAT team. Currently, we train approximately 16 hours a month, which is a national and state standard. If we have to reduce training hours, we're going to fall below those standards. And as I have spoken, federal and grant funding opportunities are seem to be disappearing or reducing. So again, I really appreciate working with you folks over the years. I hope that you listen to all of us and consider it. I know you're in a tough position, but public safety should not be compromised. So thank you for your attention, your consideration.
Thank you.
Okay, last but not least, we have Chief Mark Ruthner with Corrections.
Morning.
Welcome.
As he said, I'm Mark Ruthner. I'm tasked with running the jail, and I wish I could change the tone of this hearing. However, that isn't going to be possible. As you all know, we're under a time right now that we've never experienced before with this pandemic, and it's creating all sorts of issues. I like to say that we're out of sight, out of mind more often than not. So people tend to forget about the corrections entity of this world. And the sad thing is we're one of the most important pieces. We're one of the most libelous pieces. And if we do not manage that appropriately, then we're going to end up with lots of litigation that we don't need as a county. COVID for us has, like I said before, probably been we've been the hardest hit division. They've already made mention to the job we've done to reduce the amount of inmates in the facility. The whole goal of that reduction was to make sure that we did not end up like one of these other hospital institutions where they've had mass outbreaks. If that occurs, we really have no way to manage that. So by reducing our total number of inmates in housing, we're able to do separate quarantine work. We're able to do separate cleaning or extra cleaning and extra care to make sure that everybody stays safe. Knock on wood, we have not had an inmate outbreak yet. And we really hope that that is the future as well. The problem is the more our numbers start to go back up, even if we get to that 300 level, we are not going to be able to do the quarantine work that we need to do because we don't have the staffing to manage a separate quarantine wing. Right now, we're at our proposed reduction in staffing as of today. I received an unexpected resignation, so I'm now at the number for 2021 budget. If I go below that number in staffing, if I have any more resignations, I'm going to be forced to either hire somebody, which is contrary to what we're talking about doing for the budget, or cut things because there's not much else we can do. Unlike a lot of entities in this world, we actually have a requirement for people. We have to have a minimum number of people there at all times in order to care for the folks that are housed in our jail. It should be considered more of a care facility, like a hospital or a nursing home in most respects, because we have many, many people who have medical and mental health issues. Again, not the place they should be, but society has deemed they don't want to spend the money outside, so we're forced to have to take that on ourselves. Because of this, our workload isn't going down at all, even though our numbers are currently low. In fact, our workload has gone up. We're working harder to deal with all of those issues, from the COVID quarantines and cleanings, to the extra work that we're having to do with the increase in mental health issues that we're seeing in the facility. Often because people aren't quarantined outside the facility due to COVID. So it's an interesting twist for us. Right now, we're running into several other issues with quarantine. With COVID. Because of the reduction in our population, those tend to be the misdemeanants in the world. What that does is, number one, it decreases our revenues because we can't charge outside entities for anything but misdemeanants. And number two, it also decreases the work source that we have within the facility. So our daily cleaning, our janitorial work are all performed by inmates. We have to assign those to people who are at low risk, which would be the misdemeanants. If that population is low, then we don't have people to assign to that. On top of that, that's where our kitchen work crew comes from as well. So again, we're running into a situation, if we continue a low population to stay safe for the COVID issue, we are going to be forced to potentially look outside our facility to civilian workers to handle all of these things that we've right now been able to manage within the facility. It is an absolute double-edged sword for us. The COVID quarantine is creating more problems than you can imagine for us as far as managing our daily populations. One of the other things that we're looking at right now is trying to reduce our budgets, as we've been talking about cutting those areas that we can cut. You've already heard about all the other stuff that we're doing in training, and all of those things are being done in our division as well. But we're having to look at things that we can trim if we lose bodies. So if I can't hire people, then I'm going to be looking at potentially reducing one of my court officer positions. If that occurs, we're going to end up with a much slower delivery process for all arraignments and any other special court sessions that are being held. On top of that, the Washington State, there was a court ruling that said that judges are no longer allowed to see inmates in handcuffs unless the inmate says it's okay. That in and of itself has created a huge issue for us as far as how do we manage bringing 10, 12, 15 people down in what we refer to as the chain with 2 officers guarding them. We can't do that and get them all into the court at the same time. For safety reasons of the courthouse, the courts, and our own people, we can't do that. If this decision, let me back up. We've created a workaround with the courts. We've met with them and they're happy with our workaround right now. So we're able to continue on as we're doing. However, if something changes in that workaround due to circumstances beyond our control, then we're probably going to end up doing individuals one at a time for every single court arraignment that we hold. And I will tell you that if you can take a half-hour process and turn it into an all-day process, that's not a positive thing, that's a negative. The courts are going to get so backed up, they're not going to be able to keep up with what's going on. But there's no way for us to manage it, given our current facility layouts and our staffing levels any other way. One of the other things that we're looking at if we lose people is how are we going to manage our population? If it increases, what are we going to be doing? Well, we may have to increase our restrictions on the facility. We may end up having to close a pod in order to house people. One of the real drawbacks is I have to have a separate housing unit for female population. If we're forced to close down a pod because staffing levels go lower than what we currently have, that's going to create a whole nother problem for us because we won't be able to house them separately without moving a bunch of other people around, which eliminates our quarantine space while we're in this COVID pandemic. Obviously, if COVID goes away, that'll ease that up a little bit. It's not going to help us manage the inmate population from the numbers that are going to be brought in by the courts. We're just going to continue to have to turn people away, which isn't good for society. That creates a huge public safety issue. One of the things that we've tried to do right now to address those, we've been tasked many years as a sheriff's office with running the electronic home monitoring program. That has been a responsibility that the courts have been happy to allow us to manage. It isn't our responsibility. So we've met with the courts now and we're pushing it back onto them and we're pulling out of that service as a provider. It's referred to as jail alternatives. And I believe a lot of folks over the years have assumed that that means it's the jail's responsibility to provide that alternative. The reality is jail alternative is just that. It's an alternative provided to going to jail. It's not the jail's job to provide that responsibility or that program. So that is one of the things we're currently working on. That's going to push it out to the courts to now start managing their programs, which is going to increase their budget. Unfortunately, everything we do has got to trickle down to society. If we can't take people in, there's going to be more public safety issues. The officers on the road are going to be forced to deal with more crimes, whether it's our own deputies or whether it's the cities that are within this county. Everything that we do in the jail has a direct negative impact if we don't allow people to come in. Unfortunately, right now, we're working really hard to try to not let people in because of what's going on out there. Like I said, if COVID goes away, which I hope it does real soon, as I'm sure all of you do, that will allow us to at least free up some of our bed space to house the folks that should be housed in this facility. But again, it's not going to help with our staffing. If the staffing level continues to go down, then I'm not going to be able to have inmates in because it becomes a safety risk for not only them, but for our own employees. And unfortunately, the trickle down is the public safety that becomes directly affected by that. We're looking at grant issues right now. If that money goes away, we're going to lose a couple of our coordinator positions. One is an officer, one is a civilian. Those positions have done an outstanding job of reducing recidivism within the facility. They also manage our MAT programs as well as all the other special court programs, domestic violence court, veterans court, any of those special programs that the courts have come up with that have helped people stay out of jail and to not end up back in there again. We have folks that are managing that. We're not going to be able to do that if we lose the grant funding. So we're hoping that that money doesn't go away on us. I think in conclusion, I just want to say that we're currently at a point where we can't afford to give up more officers' positions without experiencing the need to cut programs, close pods in the jail, which will directly impact public safety. I wish I had a better message to send, but this year is not going to be a good message. Thank you.
Thank you. Sheriff, did you have anything further?
Well, I could reiterate what we've all said. Like Steve Duckworth said, it's a bleak situation. It is. Everything that we do is based on providing minimum services and public safety service to our community and try to reduce recidivism, try to be preventative, try to make our communities a safer place to live and visit and work. And the challenge, as you can tell today from what you've heard, is that everything that we're looking at is going to diminish and decrease our ability for community safety. We can only do so much with what we have. We're bare bones. I'm very, very concerned about our ability to meet minimum and essential services. And I know we're going to get those calls and those complaints about why can't you do what we need to do to safeguard my house, my kids. My neighbors are troublesome because they're dealing drugs. The homeless guy walking in front of my street is creeping me out and my kids. The public welfare and the quality of life in Kitsap County is going to be directly impacted by our inability to do what our public is expecting us to do. We're also putting our staff and the county at risk with lawsuits. If we have someone who has to do something on their own, which is inappropriate because we don't have staffing and something bad happens because someone wasn't there to back them up and to assist with a use of force situation, we're going to be facing with additional lawsuits. This is occurring across the country. It's a reality that we're faced with today, and I hate to have to say that, but that's exactly what we're having to deal with. A lot of realities that we're not enjoying, but we're trying to be prepared for and do the best we can. But we're going to have to do more than just the best we can to make sure that these things don't happen and have bad results. So I think I've said enough. I think you get a picture of where we're coming from, but the biggest message today is that public safety has to be a priority in our deliberations and decisions.
Yes, your message has been quite clear. Thank you. However, ours is pretty clear too on the income revenue level. So we're all going to have to make some tough choices. And I've seen some really fabulous programs come out of your department, and hope to hear a little bit more about those during our conversation. But first, let's ask if the other commissioners have comments, questions.
I do, if Rob is okay with that. First of all, thank you, Sheriff. Thank you, all the chiefs and White and Duckworth and Undersecretary Giese and Chief Ruthner. We're all aware that over 70% of our budget is law and justice, not just sheriff, but the courts also. I personally thank you for scrubbing your numbers to the bone as you see it. As the sheriff said earlier when he started his remarks, this is for the sheriff's office, a crisis mode next 24/7. But I want the public to hear, not just the sheriff's office, the county is not in a crisis mode. Our reserves are strong throughout 2020. And we believe that, I think all of us, the commissioners, believe this is fiscal management, but cuts are essential. And lastly, I'd just say, certainly this is painful. Painful in terms of our mission as a county commissioners, principal mission is to the budget for all of the county operations. One of the reasons we're here today. But equally, our mission is safety, welfare, and health of all of our citizens throughout the county, not just in unincorporated, but throughout the whole county. So it doesn't make it any easier. Thank you for scrubbing where you could scrub, and we'll get to where we need to get within the next month. And thanks for being here today. Oh, and by the way, Chief White, 40 years. Thank you, sir. A few years back, on your birthday, I asked you how old you were, and you said 45. So I'm having a hard time with the math here, but we can talk about that offline. Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Gelder?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the presentation, and I just have it is a tough spot to be in. Nobody wants to be in a position to not be able to help support. I think that hopefully we've been able to illustrate over the past few years our commitment to trying to help support your office and department in achieving your strategic plan. And if we had blank checks and if we were funded differently, we could do it a lot more quickly and try to do that. I think for me that one of the tough parts, just hearing the presentation today, is I can't help but, yes, we're here right now because of projected revenue shortfalls because of COVID. But it also illustrates, I think, the bigger picture that we have a systemic issue with sort of how we are funded in terms of local government. It's something that has been on a legislative agenda for the State Association of Counties. I think WASPIC has been lockstep with that as well. We need to look at how local government and general government services are funded in our state, because it puts every community, there is a lack of equity across the state in terms of what one community looks like and what they can do compared to the next, because we may have different amounts of property tax, sales tax, et cetera, that really challenges counties around the state. I think so. It's really, I don't mean to get on that soapbox too long, but it's definitely it's illustrative of that. We will get through this, but we need to make sure that we can work with our state legislators to really begin to turn and change the conversation about how we are funded overall. But I guess my question to you is, so for instance, we think that maybe if the budget shortfalls are not as bad, if the budget shortfalls aren't as long lasting, what would be your priorities for, if we could then buy back somewhere in a budget amendment during the year, second quarter, third quarter, if we could buy back services, what would be your priorities in terms of the gives that you have in your budget presentation?
Well, that's a wide open question, Rob, and I wish it was an easy answer. As you probably expect, it's not going to be an easy answer. As we've gone into COVID, which has suspended a lot of activities and has impacted our operations, as we come out of that environment, we'll have to look at that on a regular basis and monitor what that is. If the courts all of a sudden decide to open up the floodgates and we have to deal with that as a priority, then that's where our focus will have to be. If it's everybody getting back out of their house and driving drunk and committing crimes and getting back to their normal behaviors of pre-COVID, then we're going to have to put some focus on that. If everything happens at the same time, then we've got a major problem. So the only way I can think I can answer it as we're going to have to watch that on a regular basis. But I think our priority right now is to try to maintain a staffing level that we currently have, so that as people retire, we can have the opportunity to fill that vacancy, so we don't lose the ground that we currently have. I mean, it's like a battle scene that if we lose the ground that we have, it's going to be harder to take it back later. So, I mean, I think the immediate answer is staffing is the biggest thing that we're going to have to try to maintain, because if we lose a person, to try to fill that position quickly is impossible, given the training, the recruiting time, the background investigations, and the training to get them up to speed. So that's our biggest asset. That's our biggest concern at this point, is losing ground with personnel. Good question.
So I'm curious about the training program. You talked about having taken some of that internally. Can you tell us a little bit about how that works and how long it takes, and what kinds of things are trained and cost?
Well, I give you an overall
Okay.
Every year, every officer is required to provide or be provided go through 24 hours of law enforcement training. It's not just any training we think is training that's certified or graced, if you will, by the Criminal Justice Training Commission. In addition to that, we try to have hands-on training for defensive tactics, which is something we do every day, and it's a skill like a martial art that you need to be working on a regular basis, or you lose those skills. We have a firearms training that's mandatory it's a risk assessment and training that needs to be done. This isn't just going out and shooting targets. This is actually tactical and combined with scenario-based training for making appropriate responses to appropriate situations. We also have our emergency vehicle operations courses, which have to be done on a regular basis. We try to get additional bias training, criminal justice updates, the changes in the laws, mental health training for ourselves and for the public. And in addition to all of this that we normally work on and try to provide either in person or online, we're mandated to be providing a 40-hour crisis intervention class to everyone within the next couple of years, as well as the LaTexa, or the I-940, is requiring all of the investigators, or let's say we're looking at 10 to 12 investigators in our in our detective division, that will have to attend, I think it's either a 40 or an 80-hour class, to provide the certifications to be an investigator on these cooperative teams. This is a new mandate. This is a new state law that all agencies are being burdened with. And while I don't want to get on Rob's soapbox, I like to stand there right with him. These mandatory things that are being put to us are unreasonable, and our state is requiring us to do certain things without funding. They're also looking at making it mandatory this next year to pass legislation for body cameras for every police officer. And WASPIC is pushing back. Well, we don't disagree with the idea. Who's going to pay for this? We just can't take that out of a budget that we don't have to begin with. That's one of the reasons we haven't brought on body cams to begin with. We're looking at $500,000 minimum to start the program, and then hot personnel to manage it. And then Craig Adams is going to have a fit with having to try to manage the storage of the information that we're going to have to deal with as far as public disseminations and record keeping. So that's just it's not a real easy answer, Commissioner, but there's a lot of training that we're supposed to be doing, and our community is expecting us to do more and more training and appropriately so, in dealing with responses to use of force issues, and working with our communities that maybe we haven't done a very good job with in the past. Kitsap County and this local region has done well. I must say that, where other parts of the country have not been as or as caring, if you will, for the citizens that we've been working on, which is disheartening for us when we hear something happen across the country and people put us in that same bucket, thinking that that's how we're responding to. And thank goodness our community, most of our community, recognize that is not the case.
Indeed, thank you. But the trainings, do you also share those with other jurisdictions? Is that some, excuse me, a potential reduction in cost to you if you can share it with other jurisdictions?
Absolutely. We share training, cooperatively do this as much as we can. Our EVOC training, we share instructors. Defensive tactics training, we share instructors. The Criminal Justice Training Commission has developed the training scenarios for the instructors to do the LaTexa training for the certification of police officers. So that is going to be a regional training. So all the regional agencies will participate and send personnel to be trainers so they can train their personnel and our personnel at the same time. All agencies are being challenged with a lot of the same training requirements and situations. So we are collaborating with all of the local agencies to make sure that we can help each other out in these regards, because none of us have the additional resources to provide these services. And especially the Sheriff's Office, being that we have a less staffing ratio than any of the other departments, the impact to us is much greater.
Thank you. But you also have a number of vacancies, and I've heard you say in the past that it's very difficult to recruit, just because there doesn't seem to be that field of trained folks available.
Well, it's not the trained folks available. I mean, lateral positions are easy to bring in if people want to lateral to our agency, but it's the requirements that we have for background investigations, the standards that we have to recruit for. And once they're hired, then it's a 15 to 18 month process to get them through the end of the academy, through their field training program and so forth. So it's not necessarily the challenge of available people. The resource levels have gotten less over the years than they have before. We're able to fill positions. It's just getting them trained and getting them back out into the field to do the work they need to do in a quick manner. It takes a good period of time to get them hired, trained, and ready to work.
Thank you. Are there other questions?
Yeah, this is Josh Hinman. Would love to speak up. One, Sheriff Simpson, thank you. I appreciate you. I think our community appreciates the work you guys do. I went on a ride along with one of your officers before COVID hit, and it was a good experience for me. I think it opened my eyes to the work you do every day that I think a lot of people don't understand or see. I think it's more challenging than we give it credit for. I think the current environment nationwide puts you guys in an incredibly tough position. And so I'm sorry that you have to experience that. I'm very thankful for the way in which you guys have handled the pressure. I think I know a lot of different law enforcement officers in our community. I think we're very lucky that Kitsap County has the culture it has as far as the priority of safety, but also just, I think you guys have a high level of respect from our community. And so that speaks volumes to the work you do day in and day out. I don't look forward to seeing what these cuts look like. I appreciate it. I just want to say I appreciate the tone of your presentation. I think like everybody else, nobody wants to make a cut. Nobody wants to present a cut, especially when it comes to what I would say might be the core of what we do as a community, which is to provide safety. But I think the tone in which all five of you presented show, one, that you understand the gravity of the situation, two, that you don't want to do it, but you're willing to put the hard work in. And I was maybe a bit critical last year of the presentation. This year, I don't have anything that I would critique in the way you presented it. I just wanted to tell you that I really appreciate you guys. I appreciate the work you do. And my question was already asked by Charlotte, which is opportunities for us to decrease costs by partnering with other agencies. It sounds like you're doing that well. So thank you guys for your work. We appreciate all of the law enforcement officers in our community, and I look forward to getting past this and getting more training dollars into the budget so we can continue to see the great work that you do go forward.
Thank you, Josh. Anyone else? Other
Yeah,
questions?
this is
comments?
Matt Pickering.
Okay,
Yeah,
Matt.
this is Matt Pickering. I'm an employee representative, and Sheriff Simpson, I'm gonna second Josh's comments, and I'm gonna second your comments about what I believe to be the perceived attitude toward law enforcement in Kitsap County. I believe this community supports you, and it's because you've supported us. I just want to place an emphasis on the importance of the community-facing work that your agency does, whether that be through involvement in youth, by closing a street down so that they can communicate in a peaceful protest on Buckland Hill, whether it be showing up at the fairs and the canine events and at other public gatherings, and just as importantly, you and your agency's support of organizations like Leadership Kitsap and bringing your staff into those programs where they're speaking to not only the public but the leaders of community programs around our community and are collaborating all the time, every day, with everybody in every different facet of Kitsap County. So I commend you, your staff, and want to put an emphasis on the importance of the community-facing part of your responsibilities. That being said, with a $25,000 cut to wellness, it seems like we could still find room for wellness, for support for your officers, for support for your staff, and I think that that's vitally important to do what we can to support you and what you're doing as well. So I thank you and everybody on your staff for the positive attitude toward law enforcement in our community. That's because of you. Thanks.
Thank you. Other comments, questions?
Yeah, this is Bentley here.
Okay.
I'm a resident here of Port Orchard, and I would echo everyone else's thank you. You guys do a great job in protecting us, and not an easy job, and the amount of hatred and everything we're seeing towards officers these days is sickening. So I thank you guys for doing the work, and keeping a good attitude, and sticking with us despite all that. I believe it was Chief Duckworth that pointed to a study from the Washington State Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs, us being the 5th lowest in staffing for 1,000, 0.69 versus an average of 8.6. Do you guys know where we would stand in terms of, with all these freezes, where we would be falling out in terms of commissioned officers to every 1,000 residents?
We have to do some calculations, and none of us are good at math, but losing, that's why we're not in the accounting and budget process, and we need so much help, but we know that we don't want to lose any dollars. If we drop the 18 people that we're anticipating, I think we'd probably be at the bottom or the second from the bottom, which is not too far from where we've been historically over the years. We've always been down in the last 5 to 6, or the lower 5 or 6. And I think we're even, what's odd to that too, is that we are one of the more highly densely populated counties in the state of Washington. Out of 39 counties, I think there's like 4 that may be more highly dense in population than we are. So the challenge is we're becoming more and more like a city police department with half the staffing that cities usually enjoy in their law enforcement departments.
Right. I think one distinction to make is that percentage, that ratio is 2019 numbers. So that's at our peak staffing. So as we drop staffing due to these freezes and attrition and such, as mentioned, we're just going to drop on that scale. And usually we hover around the bottom 3. Through the efforts over the last few years, we've finally risen to about the 5th lowest. But usually, if you look historically, we're right around number 3 lowest in the state. So I think that's the fear, is that we're going to drop back down from where we've climbed to be the 5th lowest back down to the 2nd or 3rd.
So you mentioned accountants. I'm actually an accountant by trade, and I was just looking at the numbers. I went and downloaded the spreadsheet from their website, and if everything was static, I mean, we would be off the charts lowest. I think 0.52, or the lowest was 0.6 something. I don't have it up in front of me now. And I'm just curious with that, in regards to response times and outcomes of cases solved, what that would mean for us as a community, because I do believe we at least deserve an average level of service going forward. And I know the commissioners have a very tough job in terms of allocating these cuts, but I would just encourage them to maybe look at that and consider those things and make sure we're at least getting adequate service from.
Well, I like your last name, so we're on the same
Yes.
wavelength here. Thanks for your comments. You know, the numbers of percentage of police officers per thousand is just a measurement. It's indicative of where we might fit and where we might need to be in the future. We've always been low in our staffing numbers, but what we've been high in is the quality of people, the quality of the training, the quality of the equipment, and the desire in the heart of the officers, the corrections officers and deputies we have, and support staff in the agency to do everything they can within their power to get the job done. That has really made a significant difference in the character that you talked about earlier, in meeting the demands and services that our communities, being out in the community, being the face of government, and trying to do the best we can. That's the numbers are just indicative of where we are, but where we need to be. So we've taken advantage of other things. The other things that we've done as well is to partner with everybody we possibly can to work together to solve community problems that are not law enforcement. The mental health issues that we're being faced with today are not law enforcement issues. If other departments and other services within our community could do the job that they need to do in partnership with law enforcement, we would have less work and less people in our hospitals, less people in our jails, less people in our court systems. We have increased a substantial number of programs in our jail that is reducing recidivism and saving lives. Our medical assisted treatment program that we've taken on, and we are the first or the second county in the state to do it, is saving lives, and people are begging to get on the program. We have taken the exercise of putting loosening the chain, if you will, in tightening up the gaps to make sure that as people leave our facility, they are given transportation to a treatment facility so they don't go home and start doing what they were doing before and go right back to their past behavior. So we're looking beyond what it is the 911 call to solve, but what can we do preventively so we don't have to come back and do this again and do it again and do it again. Everybody in our agency are problem solvers, risk takers and problem solvers to improve the quality of life in Kitsap County. So it's not just we need more people. We do need more people. We need to keep the people that we have, to hold back the tide, to hold back the drugs and the problems that are coming into our community so it doesn't get worse. Somebody said something about it's not the boat and the water that's the problem, it's the water that's getting into the boat. And the problem is our boat's got a lot of leaks right now. It needs a lot of maintenance. And we're going to sink if we don't maintain what we currently have. We need to keep what we have and not go backwards. I keep repeating myself, so I will stop there. Thank you for your comments.
Yeah, thank you, and I appreciate those responses as well.
Indeed. And the commendation about, and your comments about partnering with others wherever possible are really well taken. And I look forward to working with you on other additional ones in the future. Are there other questions or comments for the Sheriff's Office? Well, hearing none, we're almost at noon. Thank you, Sheriff. Thank you, Under Sheriff and Chiefs for joining us this morning and for speaking to us. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay, thank you, Sheriff's Office, folks. And that wraps up our morning sessions. We have emergency management on at 1 o'clock and they're confirmed to start. So everybody enjoy your lunch and we'll see you back at 1 o'clock.
Thank you, Amber.
Thank you.